Well, how do you have conversations that, quote, elicit actual real-time change in society around the issue of racism? Well, it's a lot easier to talk about than to actually pull off, right? But that's what contact and conversation get-togethers aim to do, using something called contact hypothesis, as well as mindfulness meditation.
Now, to explain what this all means, we're joined by the man who created Contact and Conversation, which, in turn, is an extension of the Ambient Noise Mindfulness-Based Racism Reduction Program. Darryl Aiken-Afam is also a practitioner of the healing arts, as well as a fitness trainer. Welcome to BK Live, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
And also with us is psychologist Michelle Maidenberg, the president and clinical director of Westchester Group Works, a center for group therapy in Harrison, New York. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Group therapy, you've come to the right place. Sitting at the table with these guys.
Literally, walk us through this. How do we sort of unpack 2017? A lot of people are, within the last year, have really come to terms with the fact that we are not in a post-racial America. And, set the context about which contact, about what, this program came to be. Why was there a need for this?
Well, it was birthed out of my frustration after, specifically it was after Trayvon Martin's murder. Just my frustration with wanting to do something and not being able to do something. And I was at the time finishing up an undergrad degree in psychology at Penn State, and I wrote a paper that kind of blended some social psychological interventions with my background in philosophy and meditation. And I came up with this idea to use mindfulness to kind of get up under and unhinge the social conditioning around racism. And then that grew into the grassroots contact and conversation events where we hold them in different neighborhoods throughout New York, mostly Brooklyn right now, to get people to come together and use these techniques of yoga and mindfulness and having actual contact within the room to break through some of that training, because sometimes just talk doesn't quite get it. Sometimes you have to go to the deeper emotional and also the somatic, the physical aspects of human beings to break through all of that old conditioning.
So, Michelle, speaking of that conditioning, when people come to your practice, it's sort of self-selecting, and they're there for a purpose, and they might have some stated goals, or you help them work through some things. Mm-hmm. How do you bring that feeling into a room of people who might be strangers, or even thinking, okay, we may have one thing in common when we're here? How do you make that room?
Well, through experiential exercises, they're very powerful because you're using what's in the room. So I'll just give you an example of one thing that we talked about. So there's an exercise that I use called Eyes On, where you're actually sitting, head to head with somebody, locking knees, and just staring in their eyes. So when I did my training, I had to do it for 20 minutes straight.
With a stranger?
With a stranger, not saying one word.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So
try not saying it. Looking at
but you really get into your vulnerability.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at somebody, at first you're noticing their color, right? You're noticing the features in their face.
Yeah.
But guess what happens after a couple of minutes, right? Your mind takes off, right? And you start judging and criticizing and evaluating like we all do, and then all the features look the same. And we really get beyond that and we look that there's another human being ahead of us, right? Just like us.
Yeah.
So it's really normalizing that and really getting into what our preconceived notions are, how we discriminate, what our biases are, and you get really close in contact with that very quickly.
Okay. I couldn't even imagine, sort of that exercise, but, what are what's the end goal behind this?
Well, the end goal, if you're aware of what a schema is, or a script, a schema or a cognitive script is basically a mental program that people have that they use in order to negotiate everyday life. Like you have a script for going to church, you have a script for going to the doctor, you have a script for being at school. So you have all these different ways that you've been trained to behave. What mindfulness practices do, and what we do in contact and conversation, and like with the experiential exercise that Michelle mentioned, is first of all, it humanizes the person. That you move from a place of dehumanization, and once you do that, you can slip up under the schemas and the scripts that you have grown up to just embrace unconsciously.
Yeah.
So
It's also the associations we make. And our associations are bred out of, for example, how we're socialized, what we see in social media, what our parents tell us. The scripts are built based on who we are. And there are so many factors. There's 101 factors of why we are and why we hold the beliefs that we do and the script that we hold in our minds. And the way we behave, because the script is just the script. It's more about how we behave on behalf of the script, and that's where the issue lies.
Where does the script come from?
society, life.
Gender, race, religion, our parents, how we're socialized, who we're in contact with, the career that we choose. I mean, everything's around us.
Yeah, and depending on, like, you can carry and have certain things deep within your script that have fallen upon you just because of where you live, what your skin color is, what school you go to, gender, like she said, all these different things.
Socioeconomic status.
Right.
And on
So,
and on.
so all of that, using mindfulness, being able to come to a place where you let yourself become still, you can transcend that programming. Because even when you're having physical contact with someone who's a stranger, it's like, it's hard to be angry at someone or to feel indifferent to someone that you are connecting with in a healing type of way. So it's one thing to be at a table and have a discussion and be in someone's face. It's a whole different thing to be looking in someone's eyes or holding someone's hand or doing a meditation together where you have contact.
And it's all about empathy. It's all about compassion and empathy.
So it feels like,
connection.
are you like pushing an elephant up a hill with this way of thinking in 2017? Because everything, it seems, is made to make us into islands. We're all like this on the train or around, no one's looking
And the
up.
other,
And we're
and the other.
And the other. So
Yeah.
it really is like we are all so siloed right now. How do you break down that thing?
Here's the paradox. I don't think it's an elephant. I think the time is so ripe that when people come to these events, they're hungry for the contact. They're hungry for the empathy. They're hungry for the love. They're hungry for the tears.
So walk us through an event. Like what happens? Like you sign up and you come?
Well, the events are free, and you can find our group on Facebook. And basically, you show up. It's always in an informal environment. It's not a structured academic environment or whatever. And what we do is we talk a little bit about, we start off with oneness. That's where we start. We start with the premise that everything and everyone is one, okay? And we ask that people are able to, we hope that they're able to agree with that philosophy that everything is one. But if they're not, we also ask that, if you don't agree with it, can you try to develop the capacity for that during this time together? Because if you can't get on a level playing field with someone, like if I'm coming in being superior,
one conceit.
exactly, and that's a big part of contact theory. So we establish the oneness. Then we go into some different, we do a meditation to highlight that oneness, right? And then we go into some unpleasant things. We go into the idea of white fragility and white privilege and what that's about. Then we go into what's called the 4 pillars of American racism, which have to do with why white America has done what it has done to people of color. So we deal with some unpleasant things, and then we do some more meditation.
Could I just say something about that?
Yeah.
I have to say, because I had the privilege of working with Darryl initially on this, and I remember when I sat there, and I was, I really had to get in touch with that white privilege and what that meant, and it was jarring. I mean, it knocked me off my socks, I have to tell you.
But I was going to ask you, what are the sort of metrics by which you are successful? What is the response that you're sort of looking for people that can, in that vulnerable space, admit that, at the beginning of the day, this is where I was sort of on the barometer, and I have moved and I have pivoted.
Right. Some of the metrics are how they end up at the end of the event, because we also do check-ins. We check in to see where you're at the beginning, check in to see where you're at the end. Other metrics are during the event, how people are conversing. Post-event metrics are if you have gotten involved on Facebook, if you're reaching out, if you're coming back to subsequent events. So we're not looking to get any kind of hard, fast clinical data. We're taking more of a soft approach. to
Well,
this.
it's also action, though. I think it's really looking at, are people behaving differently?
Yeah.
Because that's what this is all about.
So who's in the room? Because like looking at you and I'm imagining you at the training and everyone like getting together on one accord and thinking, okay, is it a bunch of guys in ponytails and girls who don't shave their armpits and Bergen, like these like patchouli
Incense.
types? Yeah, like who shows
Preaching
up
to the
to
choir.
these?
Or how do you?
No, that,
Well, and
Bring
I
people-
actually raised
Not
this
that
with
we don't
Darryl.
like any of these people.
Because if you think about it, right, there's some self-selectiveness
Yeah.
that goes on here. Like you have to be open to the process. in
How do
order
we
to even
get
attend
Donald
this.
Trump in the room?
There you go.
Okay.
This is the
so this is an interesting
Conway
thing.
in the room.
The interesting thing about it is these are really, really everyday people that
Okay.
come. There are no, unshaved armpits and man buns and all that stuff. So a lot of people thought that initially, and they thought, well, this is just going to be some self-serving
Right.
thing. Nothing like that. It has always been a very diverse group. Sometimes we did one event in Carroll Gardens last year where there was only one person of color at the whole event, and that was me. It was a room full of white people
Yeah.
who came out for
So you
this.
didn't have to touch knees with a lot of people.
Yeah, and so, but I'll tell you the one demographic that is low in our events is white males. White women come out a lot more than white males, and in a year,
Why do
and
you think that is?
because white men are the apex of white privilege.
Yeah.
So it is most likely emotionally and cognitively uncomfortable for them to be there. We definitely invite them. It never gets into any kind of. There's no arguments. It's a highly respectful
It's
place.
not
But
Jerry
it's
Springer.
Yeah, no, not at all. But it's a very uncomfortable thing.
Well, and it can also, and there was an event that ran at a professional organization, which I was, there, and it gets very mindy. It gets very intellectually based, and we want to get away from that.
Yeah.
Like this is not about like trying to make sense out of this. It's just kind of being. I mean, and that's why there's that mindfulness piece. It's being with whatever shows up, good, bad, or indifferent. Like you may be uncomfortable that the thought is like you have this really mean-spirited thought or this discriminatory, kind of message that's going in your mind. That's okay. Like we invite everything that shows up
Yeah.
because we have to be open to that.
We can put anything on the table.
Yeah.
That's one of the conditions of getting together, that everything is allowed. Yeah.
I was checking out the Facebook page, and it's an all call, to people of all different backgrounds. But you end it saying, we're trying to find the cure for the disease that is racism. And I thought that was just a really sort of eloquent way to put that. But do you think racism is a disease, and how do we prevent it?
I do think it's a disease. It's a disease. It's a highly imbalanced state of mind to where you are judging and then moving forward in your life to oppress or harm other people. It's a very unhealthy a state of mind to be in.
Vicious cycle.
Yeah. But how to prevent it? Yeah, I think it's going to take time. It's going to go through cycles. I mean, it's like washing some really dirty clothes that you have to wash over and over and over again. So it's going to be an organic process.
And by the way, the stains may not be out, but you could still wear the garment.
Okay.
You know
Right.
what I mean? Like we're not gonna, in any way, we can't be fooled to believe like this is just gonna disappear and everyone's gonna live. That's not the way this works. I work. I'm a board member of the Boys and Girls Club in Mount Vernon, which is a very low socioeconomic status, community, and the main issue with these kids that you see is the lack of motivation. The self-efficacy, the belief that they could actually do better, make better, So we have to start with the youth. We got to start like underground and really, challenge their thinking and challenge the way, people are just brought up in terms of this trajectory. And that's the first step.
Like you said, contact and conversations. It's really that simple. We can start there. So
Yeah.
thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.